Hey, hello, thank you. So my name is Emma. I am from Belgium. I'm an average developer. I'm not a rock star, I'm not a ninja or anything, like some people have already said during this conference. And just to be honest, because this has already been talked about also in this conference, I am prone to burnout, as most of you might be, and this is unfortunately something that's really, really current in our profession. So, contributing to open source. What's your GitHub account? Who here contributes to open source? Please raise your hand. Okay, that's a lot of people. I see some shy people because I see that there are some people who contribute to open source here who didn't raise their hand. Contributing to open source is not only pushing code. Contributing to open source can be anything like organizing a conference. The person behind the camera there, Shirley, who was just on stage, she didn't raise her hand. She's contributing to open source. Hillary is typing, so she cannot raise her hand. Triaging bugs, writing documentation, doing server maintenance, answering questions on forums, all that is open source, and it's not just pushing code. So, for the matter at hand, writing tutorials. As we said, there's many ways to contribute to open source, but writing tutorials is my favorite way of contributing. I like to share what I've learned, and I'm trying to make the journey of other people learning the same thing that I learned. I'm trying to make their journey easier, which is not always easy. But hey, yeah, in general, writing tutorials, that's something easy. Let's write an introduction to Python tutorial. That's really easy. All you have to do is to launch Python and print hello world. Yeah, that's easy. No, unfortunately, it's not that easy. Because you're not writing for yourself. You already know how to do that. You already know how to print hello world in Python. But the person you want to teach that to, there's something that they might not that they might not know. Like, for example, yeah, you just have to launch Python. What is Python? How do I launch Python? Well, it's easy. It came installed on my machine. I just have to type Python on the command line. But that's for me. If you're using Windows, Python doesn't come with your machine. So you have to know who you're writing for. Are you writing for someone with basic programming knowledge? Are you writing for people with experience in C? Are you writing for Windows user, for Mac user, for Linux users, for teachers, for someone with a scientific background, for Unix users? Well, you don't know. And then, once you have sorted all this, there is something known as a demo effect. So when you try to show something to someone, there's always something going wrong. Like, I'm going to try to show this, and I have to mute it. Apparently I have no sound. Well, you can see this is someone making a demo of a machine, a wake-up machine. I see some people who are horrified by what's happening. And so this is a simple wake-up machine, which might not be the best wake-up you can have, but it does wake you up. And this is the third take of that tutorial on how to build a wake-up machine. And as you can see, there are little problems with this. Yes. So by the way, if you don't know this person, her name is Simon Gertz. She has a YouTube channel, and she likes to build robots and to share robots with people. And she chose not to share the best robots, but the other ones, the ones that other people wouldn't show. And yeah, she's missing a few hairs. I lost my cursor. Yeah. So, questions. Not yours. The questions from the people who are reading your tutorial. So we did our simple tutorial for Python. It was really easy. It was a print hello world. How much easier can it get? But no, I publish my tutorial and in the comments I get this. Okay, but I tried it. You've seen it. It was a screenshot of my own screen. It worked. How come it doesn't work? Does anybody have an idea why it doesn't work? Oh, only a few hands, some people nodding. Yeah, some more hands. Yeah, of course, I was using Python 2 for the tutorial, but that person is obviously using Python 3. But we never said nowhere in the tutorial that we were using Python 2 or Python 3. We never explained to anybody what's the difference between Python 2 or Python 3. We never explained how to install Python in the first place because we assumed that everybody has Python installed. So as we made some assumptions, the more assumptions we make, the hardest it is to get something right. Like, for example, in this case, I'm assuming that you're an experienced developer, that you're running on Unix, and that you have a scientific background. So please, if you're an experienced developer, raise your hand. Okay, that's about 75%. If you're running on Unix, keep your hand raised. Okay, a little less hands. If you have a scientific background, keep your hands raised. Okay, fewer people. If you're working in web development, keep your hand raised. Okay, so you see, the more questions I ask, the less hands are in the air. And so this means the more specific, the more assumption I make about my audience, the less people it appeals to. Steps. So in a tutorial, in our Hello World tutorial, we have 2 steps. Install Python and then run the code. That's quite easy, but when you try to explain something that's a bit more difficult, that has a longer process, it is really important to build steps, because we've all seen this, right? And you've probably all seen some documentations or the tutorial that was written exactly like that. So first launch Python, then run your web server, or something like that. So take the microbit, plug it in, and program your robotic arm. Yes, that's not going to work. You have to make clear steps on how to achieve your goal. But clear steps is good, but it's not always the best. I was watching other talks about writing documentations and tutorials in preparation for this one, and everybody I talked to agrees that one of the best tutorials there's out there is the Django Girls tutorial, which is really well written. And in one of the talks I watched, this person was saying, yeah, the Django Girls tutorial, it's not good. And she showed one page of this tutorial, which was the installation page. And the installation page is really long. And so when you get after installing Python, you notice that you're only about at the fourth of the page. And this is quite discouraging. Yes, in the installation section, I just installed Python. Okay, I'm only 1/4 of the way there. What's left for me to do? That's going to take a lot of time. Yeah, I better give up now, because this is really going to take too much time for me. So steps are good, but too much step is not good either. So sometimes you might want to either cut the document into several documents, like Introduction to Python, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, or you might want to say, most of you probably already have done this and that. For those who don't, here's a link to a detailed explanation on how to do that. And try to keep your steps the shortest as you can. Okay, so now here's a picture. Do you believe that this orange circle is big? Who believes it's big? No one. What about now? Is it big now? Yes. So context is important. And so when you're writing something, sorry. When you're writing something, it's always important to bring context to what you're writing. Bringing context to a tutorial can be easily done. It can be as easy as adding a screenshot. Hey, this is what my screen looks like when I get to this point. It can also be, in my tutorials, for example, I like to make mistakes, because we all make mistakes. When I work every day, I make mistakes. I get exceptions, things that are not running, and it's not fair to write a tutorial and tell people, yeah, everything has to work on the first time. Don't worry, this is easy, it will work on the first time. No, that's not true. You will get errors. So I like to include errors in my tutorials, but if my readers or my listeners get to an error point, I decided that most of the time, I hope. But if they don't know about it, it can be bizarre for them. They can say, oh, I've got an exception. What did I do wrong? Retrace their step, try to redo everything, lose 3 hours on this, and finally click next and see, hey, you were supposed to get an error. So context is really important. You have to tell them, hey, you're going to have an exception, that's normal. But always make sure that your users know where this stands. The best way to achieve that is probably to do the tutorial yourself. Once you've done writing the tutorial, or same thing goes with documentation, books. Once you have finished writing it, read it, try to do it for yourself. Install a new PC, a new Mac, a virtual machine, and try it from scratch. Do my explanations really work? Is that something that somebody with a computer without anything on it can do? Because it's quite common also when you're working, you say, okay, it's easy to do that. You just have to install this and then run that command and it will work. And the person next to you says, no, it doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work on their computer is because they're missing a library, they're missing something that you had installed on your computer, because this is something that you do every day, and so you have all the dependencies. So it's really important that you do try your tutorials for yourself. Also, by doing your tutorial for yourself, you will proofread yourself. And no matter how many times you're going to proofread yourself, it's only when the tutorial will be published that you will notice the typos. Yes, this happened to me before. So, recap. Know your audience. Give more instruction than you might think necessary. Because, of course, the people you are teaching to, they don't know as much as you. That's why they're reading your tutorials. So things that might seem obvious to you are not obvious to anybody else. Break up your work into steps, maybe different documents. Make sure you always provide context to your audience with screenshots, with error message, with simple message saying, hey, if you see this, you're on the right track. Try your tutorial and your documentation yourself. And so that's about it. So time for the real questions now. And I realize that I might have rushed a little bit.
Hi.
Hey.
So thanks for your talk. It was very helpful. An issue that I have with tutorials is also trying to keep them in sync with the code. Like the code is changing and the tutorials get out of sync because you're not running them and you're not trying them out. And I'm wondering, is there any tool or anything to maybe be able to run all the steps automatically to see if they still work or something like that?
There's nothing out of the box. It's something I do also. The only tool that I kind of use is Git. And basically when there's a change, I maintain this workshop about Ember and Django, and so every time there's a new release, the base of the project changes because you change version of Ember, you change version of Django. So what I do is that I restart from scratch and then rebase all my code to that. But it's a long process. It takes time, and there are some things that you can automate. I have some GitLab CI jobs to try to reproduce some of the steps. I guess you could probably try to set up a job. No, that wouldn't work. I was going to say, if you're using Mercurial, you could probably try to retrace all the steps because the commit numbers are sequential. So you can maybe do that. Other than that, there is no tool. And so this is one of the things when you're writing tutorials or documentation, you don't do it once, you don't do it twice. This is something that needs to be maintained, that changes. Maybe it's just one line, maybe it's 10 pages, but something will change for every release of the tools that you're demonstrating. And a tutorial that takes about 1.5 hours to give takes about a day to write and to test.
Hi Emma.
Hello.
Really good talk, thank you. I must apologise the other day for calling you Amy across the table because I couldn't hear
It's okay.
properly. I was wondering if you had any examples of projects that do tutorials really well and keep them maintained really well.
Yes, I have some. Oops. Where is the mouse? There it is. Oops. So I have this tutorial, which is the one that I just mentioned. So this here is the slides, and yeah, these are the slides with the speaker notes. So that's one side of the tutorial. Another side of the tutorial is this. Okay. So this is another side of the tutorial. So this tutorial has two distinct parts: the code part, like we just mentioned, and the actual tutorial, the explanations that go with the code. And to make things clear, there is a repository where you can go and see each commit. If I switch back to the slides, and I go forward a few slides, you can see on the top right here there are some commit numbers on most slides. And if you click on that commit number, if it will let me do it, if you click on any of those links, you will see a commit with the exact difference that you have to create for your code. And so this is an example. And although it's the first time I tried to make a tutorial with slides. Before that, I was doing blog posts. I find slides easier to maintain because not only the steps are really separated, usually one step per slide. It's easier to find your way around when you need to modify it, when you need to add new things and things like that. So I really like the slides approach. and having a repository next to it is really useful. Of course, it depends on what kind of tutorial you are doing, but if you're doing a coding tutorial that is quite complex, that takes several steps to go through, this is really handy, because anyone who gets lost can just click on the link and see the changes once again in context.
That's a really good idea. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Emma. Do you have any advice for when you're doing a tutorial for experienced people and less experienced people, the same tutorial?
So the same tutorial for two different audiences?
Yeah.
Yes, what I guess is the best approach is to have separate documents for the non-experienced people. So you have your main tutorial, and you explain how to do this, and you mention some technical words or things like that. And on everything that might require any extra explanation, you put a link. If it's a blog or on the slides, you've seen the slides, you can put links on the slides. You put a link on anything that might not be clear for a non-experienced user that will direct them to another document that's entirely dedicated to that section. Or maybe you can try to have some kind of lexical document or something to explain the words or something like that. But for example, if it's installing Python, just have a page dedicated to installing Python and link to that in your main tutorial.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Really, my question is this. What sort of artifacts can developers or other people create that will make it easier to run tutorials? What springs to my mind is recently I was looking at Puppet, and I haven't followed it, but their tutorial says, download this virtual machine, which has got everything you need, and then off you go. Well, of course, you need to know how to install a virtual machine, which is fine for Puppet, but what sort of artifacts can be made that will make tutorials better?
Yeah, Puppet is a good idea. I've been playing with things like Puppet, like for example in the tutorial I'm giving on Monday, I've brought some live Linux USB keys, so that I know that if somebody has troubles with their machine, they can just plug in the key and boot on the Linux and have the machine the way we expect to have it. Other things, there's this thing, if you're doing web or Python in general, there's several providers. There's Python Anywhere, there is Nitrous.io, there's Cloud9, who provide online editors. It's just a Linux instance with an online editor. So when you want to give a tutorial on this kind of thing, you exactly know the state of the machine that people are going to be using. So that's for Puppet. Now, if it's trying to automate to replicate the entire tutorial, Puppet is not enough, because if you want to make changes to a file that's not in the state that you expect it to be, something is going to break. So I don't know if you can use Puppet to make this better. And to get things better to the tutorial, I think we're going in the right track with Windows and integrated Ubuntu. This is bringing everybody's machine closer, because now there will not be so much differences between Windows, Linux, and Mac. Does that answer your question?
Very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, can we also thank you to Emma for a very interesting talk?